I highly recommend using plugins in ways that it wasn't intended to be used. Because that's where the magic is. I love adding distortion to things that are supposed to be clean. God is in the mistakes. Hi, I'm Alan Meyerson. I'm here with Audiopunks in my studio in Mar Vista. I'm a mixing engineer and recording engineer and sometimes producer. I spend my time mostly doing orchestral music, film scores, and all kinds of fun stuff like that. Basically, I had a desk with a laptop in here, and I got a call from Universal to mix, at that point, a song for Jennifer Hudson. So I did that on my laptop and headphones, and then I got another call, and I said, well, maybe I should get speakers. So then I got speakers, and then the pandemic hit. During the pandemic, I realized that if I wanted to work, I was going to have to work at home. So I started building the studio, and through the last 6 years, I started with, 16 fader S3, and then I went to 4 S1s, and now I have my S6, my second S6, and I've got some beautiful Oceanway Audio and Genelec speakers, and a little bit of outboard gear, a little bit of analog gear to put some stink on stuff, and it's very comfortable. It's sort of my man cave, and it's where I work and where I hang out. I love this room. It's hard for me to sit here and tell you that what gets me excited is what music is doing today. I really appreciate the talent and the professionalism of everyone out there doing pop music and hip hop and stuff like that. It's not in my core. So what still gets me excited is being in a great room and mixing and doing stuff. I love orchestral music. I look for great recordings of some of my favorite composers, and I walk with headphones on the beach, and I try to analyze what did they mic the basses with, and how did they, pan it, and how did they produce it and stuff like that. Very, very passionate about some jazz and less passionate about other jazz. And, I really always felt that whatever albums you were listening to when you were 14 become the albums that you're going to love for the rest of your life, and everything else is going to be sort of secondary to that. So I still listen to all my old Steely Dan records and Return to Forever records, and that's still a big part of my life. But I'm always listening to music. I'm just so grateful to be someone who has a hobby that people pay him for. First thing I do all the time is I listen to the reference mix that came with the project, because nowadays everyone's doing their version of what they think is a good mix, and usually they're pretty good. And if they're not great mixes, what they really are great balances. You can sort of get a sense of where they're at with the balance. So the first thing I do is I'll listen down to a mix and I'll compare it, simply just by switching back and forth like that to my mix, or whatever at that point, it might not even be a mix. It might just be some raw data. See how close it is. I try to figure out if there are any parts missing. And I try to determine what's important about this piece of music. Like this score that I'm working on now is orchestral, but the things that really matter are some of the synth elements that they have, which are the signatures to it. So I have to make sure that when my orchestra gets big, that those elements still pop through. So I just try to get the essence out of the ref mix, and then I go for it. And I like to work on it in a way where I spend sort of 2 periods of time working on each piece of music. Period number 1, I just go a little crazy. I try things. I try to find, my balance and stuff. And usually at the end of that, I think it sounds amazing. And then I listen to it again the next day, and I think it sounds less amazing. And I get to fine tune where I'm at. Because usually the first day I get my point of view, and then the next day I get my balances right and stuff like that. So that's sort of my process, is going through things twice, especially with big orchestral stuff where I have hundreds of tracks and I have to go through it. It's almost a little too much to worry about the micromanagement of the balances at first. And what I'd rather do is just sort of get it to sound like a piece of music, that sounds impressive. And then get in there and worry about if I can hear that viola part, and is that guitar popping through, and does the snare have enough punch and stuff like that. If if I have a chance to talk to the director, like for example, when I did the movie Mank with Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross, I knew exactly what they were looking for. This whole discussion was we wanted to sound like a Bernard Herrmann score. Sometimes what I just try to do, in this case, I've never met the director. The composer is in Europe, and I'm just on my own. And I listen to the piece of music they made, and I try to, like, there seem to be 3 or 4 different motifs in this. One is big orchestral, loud, hybrid, big drums. I do that, and I know how to do that. A little bit of compression and processing and stuff like that. Then another mode was a little bit more, perfect word, nostalgic, and so I turn the reverbs way down and I start using room as more of my ambience and try to balance it like that, and maybe use some plugins that age the sound a little bit. There's another one that's sort of like drum oriented and almost hip hop-ish in a strange kind of way. So I just try to look at what they're doing, and usually I can get it pretty close. Sometimes I don't. Sometimes I try something and they'll listen to it and they go, nah, not that. Hans once said to me after playing him a long mix, he goes, well, now at least I know what I don't want. So, you got to have thick skin. When I go to the theater with my family and we watch a movie that I worked on, one of 2 things happens. First thing is I'm thrilled with the way it came out. I love the dance, the choreography between the dialogue and effects and all that stuff, and it just sounds fantastic. I'm very, very proud. And the other thing that happens is I just want to run to the corner and cry because the point was missed. And a lot of times, at this point in my career, I get to be a little bit more involved with post-production, but you don't always hear what they're doing, and someone who might not necessarily be a real music person is going to get in there and take my mix and balance it against sound effects and dialogue in a way that just isn't very good, or do other things to it. And so I remember one time I had my family in from Florida. I was all excited. We went to a theater to watch this movie. I won't mention what it is. And I was so disappointed literally within the first minute. And I just knew it was going to be a long day. I was very, very depressed. And after I was done, I reached out to the production team. I said, hey, man, this doesn't sound good. So either it's just the thrill or it's a complete disaster, but usually it's somewhere in the middle of those 2. I hear things that I like, and then on the other hand, there was a moment, like they missed an opportunity there to push up a little melodic line or, some heroic thing on the brass or something like that. And I always get a chance at the end on the soundtrack album to sort of do my version of it, so I always enjoy that very much. So just to give you an example of how fun these plugins are, I'll just play a little piece of this music, just a little section. It starts with this pad, which sounds great the way it is, but I thought that there was an opportunity here to just give it a little bit of an attitude. So I added a little bit of a wow to it. So it's sort of a little bit less pitch-centered and some distortion to it. Using this guy, pretty amazing. So I could really get aggressive with it. And then after that, this wonderful echo mixer, which is sort of this reverb that has, a very aggressive input circuit. I can add more reverb if I wanted. But usually the things I do are just very small amounts of a few things. I feel that that's my best way to do it. And then from there, just because I wanted to try this out, this new echo plate, and I love it. Probably going to be my main plate plugin for a while. And then from there, the Great British Spring. Springs are great because they add a lot of kind of like artifacts and delays and make things sound more human. The thing, a lot of issues with computer-driven stuff is the fact that it just sounds computer-driven. And if you can add some humanity by adding little distortions and artifacts and panning and movement, you know, that makes a huge difference. So what started like that, just nice but kind of flat. And it kind of fits this piece of music. And then on some other tracks, I used a MIDI gate using the samples to double the, because you hear the trems, right? And then, so what I did was, this is one of those things that might get shot down by the composer. If it does, that's okay. I added a sort of like going through a fan, which I just thought was very cool. Which started its life like this. And then became that. And this might be cool, actually, in multi-mono, which is not the way it was intended to be used. By the way, I highly recommend using plugins in ways that it wasn't intended to be used, because that's where the magic is. God is in the mistakes. You know, just really getting in there and doing, you know, just pushing the... I mean, that's kind of great. So for films like this and this piece of music, I can do stuff like this. I bet you they're going to love that. This was recorded in, I think, Bulgaria. Usually I like doing my own recording. Actually, I love doing my own recording. But sometimes that can't be the case. And that's it. That's, you know, this is the process. The process for me is just have fun, and every now and then you just hit it and you go, ah, that's going to stay. But the fun of it is you can go so fast that I used to work with this director, Robert Rodriguez. I still work with him. And he had this expression, he likes to work at the speed of thought. I really like that. And nowadays with the world that we live in, you can do that. So every time a great company like Audiopunks comes up with new stuff, that's the first place I go, is I want to see what it is, and I find ways to use it. All right, pretty cool. So when I get a plugin like this, I almost never tweak it. I just sort of, if I don't find it in one setting, I go to another setting until it's so close that I really, you know, feel like I got it. Chris Nolan movies, I don't really get to change it that much in terms of what the soundtrack sounds like. He's very much against that. He wants it to be just like the film. But like on the movie I just did for Mark Mothersbaugh, I just sort of took another look. I mean, I still use my stems that I printed, but, you know, I got a chance to play with the balances a little bit and make it sound a little bit more, you know, fun when it's supposed to be fun, punchy when it's supposed to be punchy, you know, stuff like that. Because I don't have dialogue to worry about, I don't have sound effects to worry about, and I don't have picture to worry about. So I can, you know, have a little bit more fun with it just on a musical level. important is the picture for me? It's vital. And yes, there are a couple of times where I might not have it, but most of the time I have the picture. And at the very least, I'm watching it as I'm mixing. But when it's maybe not an action movie and it's more of a dialogue-driven movie or a romantic comedy or a thriller or something like that, I just mix with the dialogue on all the time because I mean, obviously I'm going to get sounds and solo things, but when I'm balancing, I'm always balancing around the dialogue because that's what it's about. You know, I think of the dialogue as a lead vocal if I was making a pop record. What would my younger self think of where I'm at today? I think he'd be pretty proud. I think that he'd be pretty surprised because this wasn't the plan. The plan was something much less grand than this. And, you know, I've had this amazing career. I've done 350 movies and, you know, maybe 250 albums and just amazing. But what I would tell the younger guy is, you know, I always say this is, you know, worry less because whether or not you worry, the outcome is going to be the outcome. And so it doesn't make sense to worry about something that's not a reality yet. And then, you know, the other thing that I think about for maybe not for me, but for other young people is what I remember Jim Carrey in a speech he made at a college. He said,
"You can fail at what you don't want, so you might as well take a chance on doing what you love."
And so that's, for me, always been the message I always give is this is something I love. I'd do it if I didn't get paid. And I actually do it when I don't get paid. I work with a lot of students and I do student films and I support young people in their journey and stuff like that because I've had the opportunities and, you know, now I'm able to help now, especially with having my home studio. I can help young people that, you know, need someone who has some experience to help them out. So, you know, that's really what it is. You know, I probably would tell them to quit smoking. I'd probably tell them that cocaine is bad. I'd probably tell them that eventually you're going to stop doing all that stuff and your life's going to get a lot better. I grew up in the 70s in New York. You know, I was in recording studios from 1977 on. It was the Wild West. Well, now it's pretty great because, you know, I work at home and my wife is here, but it was certainly hard when I was raising a kid. If you're not there, it's bad, but if you're there, it's bad because you're constantly telling your kid, you can't come in and stuff like that. Because in my previous life, I had a studio at home too. But now at this point in my life, you know, I'm really blessed, much less hardcore deadlines, so I don't really work late at night unless I choose to. And I can, you know, work during the day, stop and have a meal, take a nap, work a couple more hours, have dinner. My wife goes to bed. I can work a couple more hours any way I want to, as long as I get it done in time. And whenever I have the material, I always make sure that I schedule my workload so that I'm never pushing against the deadline. So like this stuff I'm mixing here, now I'm going to deliver today and I don't have to worry about it for another week. And then after this, I have another project that's sort of the same thing. And then things start getting a little busier with some studio films. I have a bunch of studio films coming up this year, but even those, for some reason in the last few years, that crazy working 36 hours in a row thing hasn't been happening. So I'm lucky that way. So it's funny because everyone says, do you miss the old days with analog tape and stuff? I'm like, yeah, I miss that. And I miss the amount of creativity it took to create an effect. Like if you wanted to come up with something crazy and interesting, you had to figure it out. You had to make sure you had enough gear to do it, enough patch cords to patch them and all that stuff. Now, if you have an idea, there is something out there that can do it. So, you know, my favorite types of plugins are the stuff where it gives me an opportunity to think out of the box. I love dirty little, crazy, unusual reverbs. I love putting on things, creating depth. It doesn't matter if you hear it or not. It just sort of does its job. And the Echo Mixer is one of those things. It's very springy. It's got a lot of character. You can drive it really hard. So like, I love adding distortion to things that are supposed to be clean. Maybe my influences from Chad. So it was fun being here with Audiopunks today. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you soon.